The warm summer evening at the Crystal Bay Hotel buzzed with excitement as Houston's elite gathered for the annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. Among the servers weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne was Alex, a 28-year-old whose pressed black uniform concealed the fact that he'd spent his morning showing empty apartments to no-show clients. His real estate career wasn't exactly taking off, and these catering gigs were becoming more frequent than he cared to admit. As he balanced his tray of drinks, Alex couldn't help but notice her, a woman who carried herself differently from the other guests. She stood near the grand piano, elegant in a deep blue evening gown, listening intently to a rather dull-looking man drone on about golf. Something about her caught his eye. Maybe it was the way she politely nodded while her fingers tapped slightly out of sync with the background music, or how she kept glancing toward the art exhibition in the adjacent room. Mrs. Catherine Reynolds, as he would later learn, was 52, but had the kind of presence that made age seem irrelevant. Her short silver hair framed a face that looked like it laughed often, though not tonight. As Alex approached with his tray, she caught his eye and smiled, the universal signal of rescue me from this conversation. "Champagne, ma'am," he offered, strategically positioning himself between her and the golf enthusiast. "Oh, thank you," she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I was just telling Mr. Harrison here that I should check on the silent auction items." Alex recognized his cue. The Monet reproduction is drawing quite a crowd, he mentioned casually, having overheard snippets about the artwork all evening. Her eyes lit up. "You know something about art?" The golf enthusiast wandered off, forgotten. "I know enough to recognize that the brushwork on that particular piece doesn't quite capture Monet's spirit," Alex replied, reciting what he overheard an art professor saying earlier. He'd spent the evening collecting such bits of information, filing them away like tools that might come in handy. Catherine raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Most people just see the water lilies and miss the technique entirely. She studied him with new interest. "I'm Catherine." For the next 20 minutes, they talked about art, or rather, she talked, and Alex carefully wove her own observations back into the conversation, creating an illusion of shared passion. He learned she owned a successful tech consulting firm, had been widowed for 2 years, and served on the hospital board. Each detail he mentally filed away was another brushstroke in a picture he was carefully painting. The catering manager's sharp glance finally pulled Alex back to reality. "I should get back to work," he said, letting reluctance color his voice. "But I enjoyed talking about the exhibitions coming to the Modern Art Museum this fall." "You know," Catherine said, reaching for a business card in her clutch, "they're having a preview night next month. Members can bring guests." She handed him her card, their fingers brushing slightly. "In case you'd like to continue our discussion about post-impressionism." Alex took the card, already knowing he'd call at precisely the right time. Not too eager, not too casual. As he walked away, he felt Catherine's eyes following him. He'd seen that look before. Interest mixed with just a hint of uncertainty about the age gap. It was exactly what he'd been waiting for all evening. What Catherine couldn't see was the calculated gleam in his eye as he slipped her business card into his pocket, right next to the maxed-out credit card statements and final notices from his bookie. To her, he was just a charming young man with an unexpected appreciation for art. And for now, that was exactly what he needed her to think. Over the next 3 months, Catherine found herself living what felt like a dream. It started with that art gallery preview, where Alex showed up in a perfectly fitted suit that he'd actually rented with his last bit of credit. The evening sparkled with shared laughter and passionate discussions about the exhibitions. What Catherine didn't know was that Alex had spent hours memorizing art magazines and YouTube videos to prepare for every conversation. Their second date was at her favorite Italian restaurant, though she never questioned how Alex knew about the hidden gem tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. He'd actually spent days chatting with local food delivery drivers to discover her regular haunts. When he casually ordered her preferred wine, A subtle smile crossed his face as she exclaimed, "That's exactly what I would have chosen." Coffee dates turned into long walks in the park, where Alex would share carefully crafted stories about his childhood dreams and business struggles. "I just want to make a difference in people's lives through real estate," he'd say, looking at the sunset with what seemed like genuine passion. "Help them find their perfect homes." Each word was calculated, each gesture rehearsed in front of his bathroom mirror. Catherine's friends started noticing the changes in her. Linda, her best friend of 20 years, saw how she practically glowed during their weekly lunch dates. "You seem different," Linda observed, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Happier." But when she gently brought up the age gap, Catherine brushed it off with a laugh. "Age is just a number," she'd say, though the concern in Linda's eyes lingered. At social events, Alex charmed everyone with his attentiveness to Catherine. He'd bring her favorite sparkling water before she even asked, laugh at all the right moments during her stories, and somehow remember every detail about her colleagues' children. The whispers about their age difference slowly turned into murmurs of approval. "They just fit together," people would say, exactly as Alex had planned. One rainy Sunday afternoon, while they were sheltering in Catherine's favorite bookstore, Alex accidentally left his phone unlocked on the table. A notification about an overdue rent payment flashed across the screen. When Catherine saw it, her heart ached. Here was this ambitious young man, working so hard but struggling to make ends meet. She offered to help, but he refused with what appeared to be genuine pride. "I'll figure it out," he said softly. It was exactly the response he knew would make her want to help him more. Their evenings often ended at Catherine's beautiful hillside home, where Alex would cook dinner using recipes he'd secretly learned from cooking shows. He'd tell her about his fake meetings with clients, fabricated property deals that fell through, and imaginary business opportunities that slipped away. Each story was designed to paint a picture of a hardworking man just needing one lucky break. As autumn turned to winter, Catherine found herself opening up more about her late husband, her business challenges, and her dreams for the future. Alex listened intently, storing away every detail like valuable currency. When she mentioned feeling lonely during board meetings, he started sending encouraging texts exactly when she needed them most. When she talked about her passion for helping young entrepreneurs, his eyes would light up with calculated admiration. Meanwhile, the local country club staff noticed how often Alex visited during the day, studying the habits of wealthy older members, practicing his golf swing, and perfecting his role as the perfect gentleman. He was building a character, piece by piece, that fit perfectly into Catherine's world. The whirlwind romance swept through the city's social circles, with everyone remarking on how perfectly meshed they seemed. Only Alex knew that every romantic gesture, every coincidence, every shared interest was as carefully planned as a chess match. While Catherine was falling in love with the man of her dreams, Alex was meticulously setting the stage for his biggest con yet. The night he surprised her with tickets to the symphony, her favorite composer, of course, Catherine felt her heart swell with emotion. "How did I get so lucky?" she whispered, squeezing his hand. Alex smiled back, already planning his next move. Nobody noticed the small notebook he kept in his apartment, filled with details about Catherine's life, preferences, and most importantly, her financial portfolio. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and wedding bells at Catherine's sprawling estate. The morning sun sparkled off crystal champagne glasses as hundreds of guests gathered for what society magazines would later call the wedding of the season. The property had been transformed into a romantic paradise, with white roses climbing every archway and soft music drifting through the air. Inside the main house, Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror, her heart racing with joy. Her dress, an elegant ivory creation that made her look years younger, had been featured in several bridal magazines. Her closest friend, Linda, helped adjust the pearl necklace that had belonged to Catherine's grandmother. "Are you sure about this?" Linda asked quietly, meeting Catherine's eyes in the mirror. 6 months is quite fast. Catherine just smiled, too happy to hear the worry in her friend's voice. Meanwhile, in the guest house, Alex straightened his designer tie, purchased with a small loan he convinced Catherine to give him for emergency business expenses. His reflection showed a young man who looked every bit the successful entrepreneur he claimed to be. Only the slight tremor in his hands as he checked his phone revealed any nerves. But these weren't wedding jitters. His bookie had been sending increasingly threatening messages about his gambling debts. The ceremony itself was picture perfect. White doves were released as the couple exchanged vows beneath an arch of fresh flowers. Alex's voice never wavered as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Catherine forever. In the front row, several of Catherine's business associates dabbed at their eyes, completely won over by the young man's apparent devotion. Nobody noticed how his eyes flickered briefly to Catherine's lawyer when the words joint assets were mentioned in the traditional vows. During the reception, Alex played his role flawlessly. He charmed Catherine's old college roommates with funny stories, discussed business strategies with her board members, and danced with her elderly aunts. When he raised his glass to toast his new wife, his words brought tears to every eye. "You've made all my dreams come true," he said, looking at Catherine with what seemed like pure adoration. Only he knew which dreams he was really talking about. The party continued as the sun set over the estate's manicured gardens. Strings of twinkling lights came to life, creating a magical atmosphere. Catherine's young nieces threw rose petals everywhere, delighting in the fairy tale scene. Alex kept his new wife close, whispering sweet nothings in her ear and making sure her champagne glass was never empty. Each tender gesture was observed and approved by the watching guests. Later that evening, as the celebration was winding down, Catherine's company's CFO congratulated Alex, mentioning something about looking forward to their upcoming business lunch. Alex's smile remained perfect, but his eyes gleamed with hidden triumph. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. He was now legally part of Catherine's world, with access to her home, her life, and most importantly, her wealth. As the last guests departed, Catherine and Alex posed for final photos on the mansion's grand staircase. She leaned against him, radiant with happiness, while he held her close. "I can't wait to start our life together," she whispered. Alex kissed her forehead tenderly, already mentally noting which pieces of art in the foyer would be easiest to liquidate if necessary. That night, as Catherine slept peacefully beside him in their new shared bedroom, Alex sat at the window, scrolling through his phone. He deleted his dating app profiles, the ones he'd used to practice his approach on other wealthy women. He erased his browser history, full of searches about Catherine's business empire. Tomorrow, he would begin phase 2, slowly isolating her from the friends who might notice if things started going wrong. The moonlight cast shadows across the room, illuminating wedding gifts piled elegantly in one corner. Among them was a heavy silver picture frame from Linda, with a card that read, "Always trust your instincts." Alex smirked slightly as he tucked the card away in a drawer. Catherine's instincts had failed her completely, and now her entire world, along with her fortune, was within his reach. The first red flag appeared during a quiet dinner at home, 3 months after the wedding. Catherine was reminiscing about her college years when she mentioned Boston. "I thought you said you went to school there too," she said, tilting her head curiously. "Wasn't her apartment near the harbor?" Alex's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Last month, he'd told her his old apartment was near the public gardens. A small detail, but his mind raced to cover the slip. "Oh, I moved around a lot during college," he said smoothly, launching into a story about different neighborhoods that grew more elaborate with each question she asked. That night, Catherine lay awake, turning the conversation over in her mind. More inconsistencies began surfacing like bubbles in still water. During a business dinner, Alex confidently discussed his time working in real estate in Chicago. One of Catherine's board members perked up, mentioning he'd been there during the same years. Alex quickly excused himself to take a phone call and cleverly steered clear of the board member for the rest of the evening. Their home life had settled into a routine, but subtle changes were creeping in. Alex had convinced Catherine to update their home security system, insisting on having the passwords changed for her protection. He hired new housekeeping staff, letting go of the woman who'd worked for Catherine for 15 years. "We need people we can both trust," he explained, while actually removing someone who knew too much about Catherine's daily routines. One afternoon, Catherine came home early from a meeting to find Alex in her home office, quickly closing her laptop. "Just checking email," he said with his characteristic smile, but something felt off. Later, she noticed some files on her desk had been moved, ever so slightly out of place. The changes in their social life were so gradual that Catherine almost didn't notice at first. Sunday brunches with her old friends became less frequent. Alex always had a reasonable excuse. They were too busy. He planned a special surprise, or he'd heard someone was feeling under the weather. Linda, who used to visit weekly, now only called occasionally. "Your phone's been going straight to voicemail," she said during one rare conversation. Catherine was surprised to discover her phone settings had somehow been changed. At Catherine's company, employees began whispering about Alex's frequent appearances at the office. He'd drop by unexpectedly, charming her secretary and casually asking questions about upcoming projects. During board meetings, Catherine noticed him taking intense interest in financial discussions, his pen moving quickly across his notepad. The breaking point came during a weekend at their lake house. While Alex was swimming, his phone kept buzzing with messages. Catherine normally wouldn't look, but something made her glance at the screen. The message preview showed an unknown number. "Payment deadline tonight. Don't make us come looking." When Alex returned, she asked him about it. His explanation about a persistent real estate client seemed rehearsed, too polished. That evening, as they sat on the deck watching the sunset, Catherine studied her husband's profile. He was telling her about a promising property development, his words flowing smoothly as always. But now she noticed how his stories never quite had specific details. Names, dates, and places remained frustratingly vague. Later that week, Catherine received a call from her bank about unusual activity on one of her business accounts. When she mentioned it to Alex, he became overly interested, offering to handle it for her. "You're so busy with a new project," he said, reaching for her phone. For the first time, his concern felt suffocating rather than supportive. Small things started adding up. The missing invitation to her friend's gallery opening that Alex claimed must have gotten lost in the mail. The way he deflected questions about his past by showering her with affection. His increasing insistence on attending her business meetings. Each incident was tiny on its own, but together they formed a pattern that Catherine couldn't ignore. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself doing something she'd never imagined, searching through Alex's desk drawer while he was away on what he'd called an urgent business trip. What she found made her blood run cold. A notebook filled with detailed information about her assets, business holdings, and daily routines, all meticulously documented in his handwriting. Catherine's hands trembled as she dialed the number for Tom Parker, her most trusted private investigator. After finding Alex's notebook, she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Her world had tilted on its axis. "I need you to look into someone," she whispered into the phone, glancing nervously at the bedroom door. "And Tom. Be discreet." While Alex was supposedly attending real estate conferences, Tom's investigation began unraveling the carefully constructed facade. The first bombshell dropped when Tom sent photos of Alex meeting with Richard Chen, Catherine's biggest business competitor, in a dimly lit restaurant across town. They weren't discussing properties. They were huddled over documents that looked suspiciously like Catherine's company's confidential files. The deeper Tom dug, the darker the truth became. Alex's real estate license, suspended 3 years ago. His fancy college degree, never existed. Instead, a pattern emerged. a trail of wealthy, older women across 3 states, each left financially devastated. He refined his technique with each victim, learning from his mistakes, becoming more sophisticated in his approach. One rainy afternoon, while Alex was at his office, Catherine sat in Tom's car, listening to recordings that made her stomach churn. There was Alex's voice, crystal clear. "The old lady has no idea. Another month, and I'll have access to everything." The woman he was talking to laughed, calling him a genius. Catherine recognized the voice. It was her new housekeeper, apparently another player in Alex's scheme. The gambling debts were staggering. Tom uncovered links to underground betting rings, loan sharks with dangerous reputations, and a web of lies that made Catherine's head spin. Her charming, attentive husband owed hundreds of thousands to people who didn't take IOUs for answers. Now it all made sense. His desperate need to access her accounts, his constant presence at business meetings, his late-night phone calls. But the most painful discovery came from an unexpected source. Linda, Catherine's oldest friend who'd been gradually pushed away, had kept a detailed diary of her concerns. She'd noticed things Catherine had missed in the whirlwind romance. How Alex had researched Catherine's favorite artists before they met, how he bribed a waiter at her regular lunch spot for information about her schedule, how he'd carefully orchestrated every chance encounter. One entry particularly stood out. "Saw Alex at the country club today. He didn't notice me. He was practicing his golf swing and rehearsing stories about his fake business deals. Watched him repeat the same conversation 5 times, perfecting his tone. He's not just a con man. He's an actor playing the role of a lifetime." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with sickening clarity. The mysterious changes to her phone settings. He'd been intercepting calls from concerned friends. The new security system, designed to monitor her movements. Even their wedding had been calculated, held exactly 1 day before a crucial shareholder meeting, ensuring he have legal rights to attend. Catherine's company's financial advisor finally confirmed her worst fears. Small amounts had been steadily disappearing from various accounts, expertly hidden in legitimate-looking transactions. Alex had been slowly bleeding her business dry, while simultaneously positioning himself to take control of key assets. The sophisticated nature of the fraud suggested he had help, probably from someone inside her own company. As she sat in her office late one evening, surrounded by evidence of Alex's deception, Catherine received a text that made her blood freeze. It was from an unknown number. "Ask your husband about Michelle. Or Barbara. Or any of the others. We're not his first performance." Attached was a photo of Alex at another wedding, years ago, standing beside a different wealthy bride. The woman now lived in a small apartment, having lost everything to a man she thought loved her. The final straw came when Tom discovered Alex's real phone, not the one he showed Catherine, but another, hidden in his gym bag. The messages revealed his endgame: plans to transfer the bulk of Catherine's wealth to offshore accounts, fabricated documents that would give him control of her company, and arrangements for his escape once everything was in place. The man she'd fallen in love with, the man who'd moved her friends aside to better manipulate her, hadn't just hidden his past. He'd invented an entire person, building a character designed to exploit her deepest desires and vulnerabilities. As Catherine stared at the mounting evidence of his betrayal, she realized she had a choice to make. She could confront him now, or play along just long enough to turn the tables on the master manipulator who'd nearly destroyed her life. The annual charity dinner at Catherine's mansion felt different this year. Crystal glasses clinked, soft music played, and elegantly dressed guests mingled throughout the grand dining room. But underneath the polished surface, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Catherine had planned everything carefully. Every important person in their lives was present: her business partners, board members, closest friends, and even Alex's supposed business associates. She'd chosen this public setting deliberately, knowing Alex would have to maintain his charming facade. The evening started normally enough. Alex worked the room with his usual grace, telling animated stories about property developments that didn't exist. Catherine watched him from across the room, her heart heavy with the knowledge of his deception. She observed how naturally the lies flowed from his lips, how expertly he played the role of devoted husband. "Another wonderful event, darling," Alex said, appearing at her side and kissing her cheek. The gesture, once cherished, now made her skin crawl. She noticed how his eyes darted to the business documents visible through her partially open study door, documents she'd left there as bait. Dinner was served at 8. Catherine stood to make her usual welcome speech, champagne glass in hand. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But before we enjoy our meal, I have an interesting story to share." Alex's smile flickered slightly as Catherine continued. "It's about a man who made quite a career out of marrying wealthy women." The room grew quiet. A man who perfected the art of learning their habits, mimicking their interests, and slowly gaining their trust. All eyes turned to Alex, whose comfortable smile had frozen in place. Catherine pulled out her phone and played a recording, his own voice discussing plans to drain her accounts. The color drained from his face as his words filled the silent room. "Darling, you're clearly confused," Alex said smoothly, standing up. But Catherine wasn't finished. She motioned to Tom Parker, who distributed folders to key guests, each containing evidence of Alex's fraud, his gambling debts, his meetings with her competitors. "Confused?" Catherine's voice was ice cold. "Like Barbara was confused, or Michelle?" She watched recognition flash in his eyes at the names of his previous victims. "They send their regards, by the way. Took a while to track them down, but they had quite a lot to share." Alex's mask finally cracked. His charming smile twisted into something ugly. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed, low enough that only those nearby could hear. But Catherine had anticipated this too. "Actually, I do," she replied calmly. "For instance, I know about the offshore accounts you've been setting up. And your friend in my accounting department. He confessed everything this morning." She nodded to her chief of security, who stepped forward. "The police are very interested in those transactions." The room erupted in whispers. Alex's eyes darted toward the door, but security guards stood ready. His careful plans were unraveling thread by thread in front of the very social circle he'd worked so hard to infiltrate. "You're just a sad, aging woman who was desperate for attention," Alex snarled, dropping all pretense of civility. "Who would believe you over me?" Catherine smiled, almost pitying him. "The FBI, for one. They're particularly interested in your pattern of fraud across state lines." She turned to her guests. "My husband here isn't just a con man. He's a performer. Every gesture, every loving word, every shared interest was rehearsed. He studied me like a script, learning his lines, perfecting his role." Alex lunged for the study door, presumably for the documents he'd been eyeing. 2 security guards smoothly intercepted him. As they led him away, he shouted accusations, claiming Catherine was mentally unstable, making up lies about her beloved husband. But Catherine had one final card to play. She nodded to her tech team, who projected onto the dining room wall Alex's own notebook. Pages and pages of his meticulous plans to destroy her life, written in his distinctive handwriting. The room fell silent again, this time in shock at the coldly calculated betrayal laid bare before them. Catherine picked up her champagne glass, her hand now steady. "I believe dinner is served," she said calmly. "Though I apologize, my husband won't be joining us for the rest of the evening. Or any other evening, for that matter." As the police led Alex away in handcuffs, Catherine caught a glimpse of his face. No longer handsome, just twisted with rage at being outmaneuvered by the very woman he'd thought he'd fooled completely. The days following Alex's arrest felt like walking through a thick fog. Catherine found herself alone in her huge house, surrounded by reminders of their life together. Photos she now knew were staged, gifts given with calculated precision, even the coffee mug he'd used every morning, all part of his elaborate performance. The media circus was relentless. Local news vans camped outside her gates, their cameras hoping to catch a glimpse of the wealthy businesswoman who'd been so publicly deceived. Headlines screamed, "Tech Empire Harris discovers husband's double life," and "Marriage of Convenience, a love story gone wrong." One morning, while sorting through Alex's belongings with her security team, they discovered a hidden compartment in his desk drawer. Inside lay a small notebook containing what looked like a script. Detailed notes about Catherine's likes and dislikes, her daily routines, even examples of how to respond to her different moods. Reading it made her stomach turn. "He studied me like a character in a play," she whispered to Linda, who hadn't left her side since the dinner party revelation. The financial damage was extensive. Her company's forensic accountants uncovered a complex web of unauthorized transfers and manipulated documents. Alex had managed to divert nearly $2 million through a series of cleverly disguised transactions. Worse still, he shared confidential business strategies with her competitors, potentially compromising several major deals. Her office felt different now. Catherine would catch her employees whispering, their conversations dying when she walked past. Some looked at her with pity, others with barely concealed judgment. How could such a successful businesswoman have been so thoroughly fooled? She overheard one junior executive say, "Maybe she's losing her touch." The betrayal cut deeper than just money. Going through security footage, they found recordings of Alex practicing conversations in empty rooms, rehearsing his reactions to stories she hadn't even told him yet. He'd built their entire relationship on research and manipulation, turning her life into his personal stage. Late one night, Catherine found herself scrolling through photos on her phone. There they were at their wedding, his smile now obviously practiced. Another showed them at her favorite restaurant, the one she later learned he visited for weeks before their chance meeting, learning her preferences from the staff. Each memory was tainted, each happy moment revealed as carefully choreographed deception. The investigation revealed more victims from Alex's past. 3 other women came forward, each sharing a similar story: a whirlwind romance, a charming younger man who seemed too good to be true, and then financial devastation. One victim had lost her entire retirement savings. Another had to sell her family home. Their stories haunted Catherine at night. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends, the same friends Alex had slowly pushed away. "We tried to warn you," some said gently. Others asked how they could help. But the hardest messages were from business associates questioning her judgment. How could they trust her with their investments when she'd been so completely deceived in her personal life? The police interviews were exhausting. Catherine had to relive every moment of their relationship, explaining how Alex had gained access to sensitive information, describing the gradual way he'd inserted himself into her business affairs. The detective's face remained professional, but she could see the unasked question in his eyes. "How did you not see this coming?" One afternoon, while cleaning out Alex's closet, Catherine found a burner phone hidden in an old shoe. The messages on it revealed the full scope of his planning. He'd been coordinating with a network of accomplices: the new housekeeper who reported her movements, the fake business associates who vouched for his credentials, even a makeup artist who'd helped him perfect his sincere expressions. The hardest moment came when she found a recorded video on his laptop. It showed Alex practicing his wedding vows in front of a mirror, trying different variations of emotional delivery, timing his tears perfectly. The man she'd thought had spoken from his heart had been performing a rehearsed scene, complete with practiced hand gestures and calculated pauses for effect. Sitting alone in her home office, surrounded by evidence of his deception, Catherine finally allowed herself to cry, not for the money lost, but for the death of what she thought was real love. The tears came not from sadness, but from anger at herself for falling for such an elaborate performance, for letting him isolate her from those who truly cared, for ignoring the warning signs that now seemed so obvious. The courthouse buzzed with tension on the first day of the trial. Catherine sat straight-backed in the front row, her business attire serving as armor. She watched as Alex entered in his orange jumpsuit. Gone was the designer clothing and carefully styled hair. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw something flicker across his face. Not remorse, but calculation. The prosecution's case seemed solid at first. They had mountains of evidence. Bank records showing fraudulent transfers, recordings of Alex's incriminating conversations, and testimonies from his previous victims. But Alex had one last performance to give, and he'd been rehearsing for months. His defense team painted a different picture. They portrayed him as a misunderstood young man who'd genuinely fallen in love with an older, powerful woman. My client's only crime, his lawyer argued, was trying too hard to fit into his wife's world. The story spread through social media like wildfire. Had Catherine Reynolds, the successful businesswoman, simply discarded a younger husband when she tired of him? Local newspapers picked up the narrative. Power dynamics. When age gaps lead to accusations, read one headline. Photos of their happy moments were splashed across papers, making Catherine's claims of deception seem harsh. Alex's lawyer cleverly used their wedding video in court, showing moments where Catherine appeared completely in love. "Does this look like a woman being conned?" he asked the jury. The turning point came during week 3. Catherine sat in the witness stand, enduring hours of cross-examination. Alex's lawyer tried to paint her as a controlling, wealthy woman who'd sought to buy a younger man's affection. But Catherine remained composed, even as they dug into her past relationships and business dealings. "Yes, I loved him," she admitted to the court. "I loved the person he pretended to be." Then she pulled out the notebook, the one where Alex had written his scripts, his practiced reactions, even notes about how to manipulate her emotions. Reading entries aloud, her voice never wavered. Day 47. She responds well to physical affection when upset about work. Use this to deflect questions about missing funds. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered. Not just for Catherine, but other victims of romance fraud who saw their own stories in hers. They shared similar experiences: the love bombing, the isolation from friends, the gradual taking over of their finances. Their presence reminded everyone that this wasn't just about one wealthy woman's mistake. Alex's cool facade finally cracked during the testimony of his former accomplice, the housekeeper who'd helped spy on Catherine. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she revealed their entire plan, including Alex's backup scheme to blackmail Catherine if the original con failed. As she spoke, Alex's practiced smile slipped, replaced by a scowl of betrayal. The media circus intensified. Every day brought new revelations. Offshore accounts discovered in tax havens, connections to organized crime figures, even evidence that Alex had been planning similar cons against other wealthy women while married to Catherine. His carefully constructed image crumbled piece by piece. Catherine's business associates testified about how Alex had tried to manipulate company decisions, pushing for risky investments that would have benefited his hidden partners. The jury listened intently as financial experts explained the sophisticated nature of his fraud. This was no amateur operation. One particularly tense moment came when Alex himself took the stand. He put on his best performance yet, tears welling up as he spoke about his genuine love for Catherine. But the prosecutor was ready. They played video clips of Alex practicing these exact emotional displays in front of mirrors, complete with timestamps showing they were recorded before key conversations with Catherine. The defense tried one last strategy, claiming Catherine had used her wealth and influence to frame Alex out of spite. But then came the testimonies from his previous victims. One by one, they told nearly identical stories. The pattern was undeniable, the methodology too similar to be coincidence. Throughout it all, Catherine maintained her dignity. She attended every day of the trial, facing not just Alex, but the public scrutiny of her private life being dissected. Some days, leaving the courthouse felt like walking through a gauntlet of judgment. Reporters shouting questions, onlookers whispering, social media buzzing with opinions. In the end, the truth proved stronger than Alex's final performance. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. As the jury began their deliberations, Catherine sat in her lawyer's office, knowing that no verdict could undo the emotional damage, but hoping it might prevent future victims from falling prey to similar schemes. The verdict came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The courtroom fell silent as the jury foreman stood. "Guilty on all counts," echoed through the room. Alex's carefully maintained facade finally shattered completely as the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, plus financial restitution to all his victims. Catherine sat there, watching her ex-husband being led away in handcuffs. His final glance back wasn't of remorse or anger, but something closer to annoyance. Like an actor frustrated that his best performance hadn't won over the audience. The months that followed brought both healing and purpose. Catherine threw herself into rebuilding not just her life, but her company's reputation. She discovered that being open about her experience actually strengthened her business relationships. "If you can bounce back from this," one board member told her, "you can handle anything." Walking through her home no longer felt painful. She redecorated, erasing the traces of Alex's presence. The security system he'd installed to spy on her was replaced. She rehired her old housekeeper, whose friendly face and genuine concern helped make the mansion feel like home again. But Catherine wanted to do more than just move on. During the trial, she'd met dozens of other fraud victims. Not all wealthy, but all carrying the same emotional scars. Their stories stayed with her, especially those who hadn't had the resources to fight back. One evening, while having dinner with Linda, an idea took shape. "What if we could prevent this from happening to others?" she mused. Within weeks, the Catherine Reynolds Foundation for Romance Fraud Prevention was born. The foundation focused on education and support. Catherine used her business expertise to create a network of legal advisors, counselors, and financial experts. They developed programs to help victims rebuild their lives and workshops to teach people how to spot the warning signs of sophisticated romance scams. Her story began appearing in business schools as a case study in both personal and corporate security. She spoke at conferences, sharing the subtle red flags she'd missed. "These predators don't just steal money," she would explain. "They steal trust, confidence, and peace of mind." The foundation's hotline started receiving calls from around the country. Each story was different, but the patterns were familiar. Catherine made sure every caller got the support she wished she'd had: practical advice, emotional support, and when needed, legal assistance. Her business flourished too, partly because of her newfound mission. Clients appreciated her transparency about the experience and her determination to help others. The company launched a new division focused on protecting small businesses from fraud, using lessons learned from her own experience. Local law enforcement began consulting with her foundation. They used insights from Alex's methodical schemes to better understand how modern romance scammers operate. Catherine's detailed records of how he'd manipulated business and personal relationships became a valuable training tool. 1 year after the verdict, Catherine received an unexpected letter. It was from Alex's mother, apologizing for her son's actions and sharing stories of his troubled past. The letter brought no joy, but it helped Catherine understand that she'd been targeted by someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting the art of deception. The media narrative shifted. Instead of the wealthy woman who'd been fooled, Catherine became known as the survivor who turned her pain into purpose. Magazine articles focused on her foundation's work. Television shows invited her to share advice about protecting oneself from sophisticated scams. On the second anniversary of Alex's arrest, Catherine hosted a different kind of dinner party at her mansion. The guests weren't society figures, but survivors, women, and men who'd found support through her foundation. They shared stories of recovery and rebuilding, their laughter echoing through rooms that had once witnessed so much deception. Life had changed in unexpected ways. Catherine's circle of friends was smaller but more genuine. Her business decisions were more cautious but also more innovative. She'd learned to trust again, but with wisdom rather than fear. Late one evening, going through old photos, Catherine found their wedding picture. Looking at it now, she could see what she'd missed before. The calculated look in Alex's eyes, the practiced tilt of his smile. But instead of pain, she felt something like peace. She'd turned his betrayal into a force for good, helping others find their way back from similar darkness.